Hello, everybody, and good morning. Having some slight delays here getting a camera, but we are Hide and Speak. We stream every Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're doing a Friday special here in the morning. Our topics are privacy, free speech, and internet freedom. We have a Q&A. You can ask us anytime, any question. Just put a capital Q, colon, and then ask your question. What to expect from us? No religion, no partisan politics. Left, right. It's all the same. So the opinions expressed by members of our panel are of their own personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect the views of Hide and Speak or vp.net. I'm Shane. I'm here with Chris, Nathan, and we have a special guest today. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself there, Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris from vp.net. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer, and I'm super excited to be here. And just on a personal level, I really wanted to thank you for being here with us today, Jemimah. It's an absolute honor to have you here with us today.
Absolute pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful, wonderful, and welcome. And Nathan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nathan. I work in the design and marketing department at vp.net. Big fan of internet freedom and happy to be here on this special episode.
Well, welcome to it. And so she is the CEO of Index on Censorship. She's a talented author, journalist who freelanced for The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Independent, Vice, CNN, and more. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what the mission you're behind?
Absolutely. So I work at an organization called Index on Censorship, and I have been at Index for 9 years now. I started at the organization 9 years ago, and I started in a journalistic editorial capacity because at the heart of the organization is this amazing heritage magazine that's been around since 1972, a quarterly publication. And for people in the media, it might not be the most well-known magazine across society, but for people in the media, you would hear it. It's very, very well respected. Obviously, journalistic rights, media freedom is a big thing of what we do. And I had been living and working for several years in China, and I had been writing for Index as a freelancer, and had been interested in, obviously, how China censors. And then I saw this opportunity to work at Index and to broaden my knowledge of censorship and the global attacks of freedom of expression. And well, 9 years later, I'm now running the organization. We are both a newsroom or an investigative kind of editorial outfit, as well as a campaigning powerhouse, I would say. I like to say, even though we're very small. And we do lots and lots of work around the world. We're global, and we work with all kinds of amazing activists, artists, academics, and digital freedom is something that has been for many, many years a building body of our work. So it's really, really good to be on this podcast and to be chatting about something that I think is really fundamentally important and, to be honest, foundational to how we speak today.
Awesome. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And freedom of expression, that's something that we highly believe in. And the fight for privacy and the fight for the ability to express yourselves are something that, Chris and I have done for like the last 15 or so years. And it's been an ongoing battle. I just seen yesterday, it's almost surreal that, you can go online now and even be American, right? And then you hop on and Discord is already censoring our messages. And I feel like this is just the beginning of something like going to be colossal for all of us. So Index on Censorship was founded long before the internet existed. How has its mission evolved as censorship moved online?
That's a really great question. I would say that firstly, our job has got harder because the communication has got in some ways easier. So you can communicate in ways that you just couldn't 40, 50 years ago when we first started. You can be heard very easily around the world. So that also means that people can censor more. So whereas before we might have been looking at only a few different ways in which you could censor, now we have to consider everything that the online world does, from the algorithm through to content moderation, through to outright ban. So we have this kind of this entire new and building strain. At the same time, I think one of the interesting things that I kind of just alluded to in terms of people can communicate more is that when we started on the back of calls from Soviet dissidents in the early 1970s. They had the ones who reached out to the people who then went on to found Index. They went to Red Square and they were protesting in the late 60s against the full-scale invasion of what was then Czechoslovakia, and they were arrested and they were sent to prison camps or sent to psychiatric units. And in order for them to get the word out, they sent a telegram into the Times of London, which was then read by as said, then what became the founders of Index. So that was in the late 60s, and it took till the kind of the early 70s for us to decide what we wanted to do. And what we decided was we were going to look globally at threats to free expression, but we would work in the service of all the dissidents and protesters and artists and academics who were being censored, and we would publish what they couldn't publish. And so we were what was part of the Samizdat network, this Russian word for kind of illicit material that was clandestine material that was traveling across the Soviet Union. And it was not easy getting that stuff out. Whereas now it is much easier when we have at least, decent rights. When you see full-scale bans, the closures of internet spaces, it can become harder. But in theory, we actually have so much material sometimes that we have to be very clear on how and what we should be taking, because otherwise we could get overwhelmed. So it's a real mixed bag. Our remit has got bigger, but our access to some of the material has also got easier.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm resonating with you a lot on this. It's something that we've really pushed for, and to have a voice is really important. It seems like we have so many outlets to have a voice, and there's been a lot of hoops and hurdles and stuff for us over the years, but for you, just going back way before watching this evolve and see what it's turned into. In the 90s it was all so new to us, and then in the early 2000s it was that's when we started to see social media come about, and then in the later on years from that, we see we have like what you have a friends group and we all have 20 different messengers. There's 50 different social medias. And that's the thing. That's something that Nathan and Chris work a lot with, and they're pretty much the masters of social media. They see they see the things that other people don't see. Chris, what's your take on social media and what it's evolved to today? Because I know you've worked with social media since inception, and working with these things today, it's posing its own challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people think that like social media has become a lot less private or a lot more censored and things like that over the years. And honestly, like I think it for the most part hasn't changed all that much. The total levels. The difference is who has control over those functions. Because I remember years ago, for example, like on Facebook, I could create an ad campaign and literally target a CEO of a specific company. I could literally laser target it down that much, which is really kind of scary. And that sort of stuff went away, but that data certainly didn't go away. Facebook still has all that data, and they're still using that to help them make money. And the same thing goes for like the censorship stuff. Like used to have, I think, a lot more control, and now there's certain things that I see get posted that are actually against the terms of services of a site, and a lot of people report it, but it might support the ideology of the site owners. So that post will just fly and then nobody has a problem with it. But then I'll see somebody post something that is 100% okay, not illegal, it's not immoral, it doesn't even break their terms of services, but it goes against their political beliefs of that website, and immediately it just gets removed. So I mean, it's I think there's a lot more control. The websites themselves now have taken a lot more control over what data gets out there, and at the same time they're working a lot more closely with governments who, we see stories come out where the government will just send over a list and be like, these are all the posts we don't like, make them go away, and they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. And we learned that Twitter had government employees working at Twitter on the American taxpayer payroll working to censor Americans, which is just, it's a horrifying thing to think. So, I mean, the lines have been really blurred between the government and the private companies now, especially when it comes to the social media platforms. So things are getting censored left and right, and you really don't know who is doing it or why it's happening. And there's very, very little transparency. Like they'll just, I mean, we talked about this before, you'll get a message that says your reach is being limited because some recent post that you made went against some rule that we have. And like, that's all the information they gave you. So you don't know what you even did wrong. So you start going through your profile and you're like, well, I got to delete all this stuff because I don't know which post it was. So now they've actually come up with ways to get people to self-censor themselves even more than they would be censoring us. So it's the amount of information that just gets lost or people are just afraid to post. And it's often the really important stuff that people should really, really do need to hear about. And those are the things that just don't make it out there anymore.
And now we're entering a phase where it's like, that's all going to be controlled by an AI. They used to have, hired, thousands of people to look over all these posts and make decisions on things like, oh, this goes against it. But now all those people are getting fired and it's going to be replaced by an AI that who knows what its morals are.
And that's the thing is AI doesn't have morals. It doesn't have a soul, right? It's one of those things. So, I'm looking into technology every day, all day. I breed technology. I need to look under the hood. I need to see how it works. I need to plan the future around it, right? And when you see these things like AI and algorithms, the lines are blurry there, Chris. Like we just had one of our social media profiles just deleted. No explanation, no email, no courtesy call, nothing. Just straight up, you're deleted. That's it. No recourse, nobody to reach out to. And even if we could reach out to anybody, they wouldn't be able to respond to the emails because they just don't do that. So we're seeing these times have changed drastically. And now that we're at the mercy of the AI, I'm looking at these things like with Discord, and it just filters through the messages before it allows people to read it, and it wants them to upload their IDs, saying, hey, this content's not good. Upload your ID so that you can see it. Hey, I'm not going to do that. And however we look at that, I mean, sure, it might protect somebody's eyeballs from reading some words on a screen, or it could protect them from seeing certain things. But that's just the thing is like from what I've seen, because I've been on the internet since I was 10 years old, right? I'm almost 40 now. And it's one of those things that to see this is just, it's almost comical. It's almost like we're in some kind of bad movie with a bad script and a bad plot. And it's what it's rolling to. Never in the land of the free did I expect that these things were going to happen. So I have another question. What's a country people don't usually think about where digital repression is getting worse?
There are obviously lots of countries that people wouldn't think about. I recently did an article on the complete shutdown of the internet in both Iran and in Uganda. When I was researching that article, I was looking at digital blocks around the world, and I was actually astonished by how many there were, mostly with African countries. And I suppose in the UK, some of these countries were just not, for whatever reason, our news journalists are just not as equipped to report on them, or they think that we're not as interested in them. So I hadn't even heard of some of this stuff. I was quite astonished. But I think another country that it doesn't go completely under the radar in the way that some of these African nations who have done complete blockades have. But I think the one that deserves more attention, in my opinion, would be India, because India actually has the largest amount of internet users. I think they're around 1 billion at this moment in time. And they have been trying to push through quite a lot of legislation over the last 10-ish years under Modi, to a lesser or greater degree of success, which would curb online rights. And they have obviously done lots of more successful takedown requests from social media. Only yesterday, you might have seen the story about how they now want illegal content on social media to be taken down within 3 hours, which has gone from 36 hours to 3 hours. So in order to do that, I mean, you're going to have a machine, right? You're not going to be able to have humans when you've got 1 billion internet users. I don't know how you can do that without it being fully automated. And again, I think the kind of people who don't work in the digital rights space will see this and they'll go, well, it's illegal content, that's fine. But actually, really, the algorithm, whatever, the AI tool that's going to be skilled to do this is going to probably over censor. It's going to scoop up legal content. And of course, any tool can be redeployed against just dissenting voices. So I think we need to be concentrating a little bit more on ultimately the world's most populous and very digital. They're actually very digitally forward as well. I mean, some of the most amazing innovations in terms of AI come out of India. So the combination, I think we should be paying a lot more attention there.
Absolutely. I do agree that we should be paying a lot more attention. It's hard for other people around the world because they don't speak the language. They don't see what's actually going on over there. And when you're interacting with people online, you're pretty much doing it in your own language and people that whatever the case may be with it. We're seeing more governments push age verification laws that require users to prove their identity to access content. How can these systems be used intentionally or not as tools for censorship?
So I would say that there are two different ways in which they can be used as tools for censorship. I mean, one is just to, usually they're coupled with saying an entire group of the population cannot access the tools until they're a certain age. So you've seen Australia leading the charge here, where they've kicked off the 13 to 16 groups. You've seen loads of European countries saying that they want to follow suit. So it can just be a way of very literally stopping younger people from having access to platforms that, albeit flawed, still have what is, in my opinion, a net benefit for our freedom of expression rights. I think the other thing is in terms of our privacy, because in lots of the places where you have age verification and lots of the platforms where they want them, you are insisting a lot of the time that people upload, irrespective of their age, that people upload their own personal ID to an external, a third party. They're not always transparent about what the third party is. And for people from authoritarian countries, they will see already the dangers of that. One of the things that China's done when it's gone to advance its control of the online space is to insist that everyone has to register their accounts under their real names. So it is a way of, essentially, it just is an invasion to privacy. It will put people off, and anything that does that will chill speech.
And that's the thing too, is it really is chilling the speech. It's calming it's bringing it all back 10 pegs is what it seems like. And the thing is I work in information security and a lot with community. So I work a lot with people, and I have over the years, with people who want the voice, that to have that voice and then have an audience and then say things. And that's part of the reason why we started this stream, was to give people that voice, and so that if they wanted to come on anonymously and speak about these things, they could feel valued and be heard. The thing is, in information security, to protect systems, you kind of have to create a profile on what's good, and then that way, if any content doesn't, or any behaviors don't meet that good criteria, then it's automatically ruled out as bad, right? So there's so many different methods to rule things out and to keep things off a platform. But for example, if an AI creates a profile on how you talk with your friends, and just, hypothetically, a gentleman that goes to the bar every once in a while, and he talks with his friends a certain way, they bring up guy talk, and then they start talking like this in their little group chats online. The AI builds a profile on them that, hey, these guys might be some domestic terrorists or something, whatever word it wants to label them as. And then, when they're actually doing their jobs and being in the real world, and then say they have Zoom meetings, say they have these other meetings, or say they even have their own podcast or something. that's they're automatically flagged. They already have these attributes attached to their names, and not just their digital names. They have it now attached to their real world names, their real world IDs that are being uploaded. So, just seeing these things and seeing that, the level of where privacy should be versus where it's at now is just, I live under the idea that only God can judge us, right? I mean, humans are going to judge each other all the time, but now we're throwing AI into the system so it can judge us too and prejudge us, to come up with a determination for its masters over there to control the narrative. And that's just the only way to look at it, is they are controlling the narrative. Because now I don't want to go post on social media. I don't want these shadow profiles attached to some data points on not just me, but anybody I work with or anybody, all my loved ones. So how is AI changing the landscape of censorship, both for suppressing speech and for resisting suppression? Can you give it from your perspective?
I would love to know, and I'll invite you in a second, about the positives of AI for speech. I've given this a lot of thought, and I feel that I come up short. And that's not to say that I can't see the positives of AI for other industries. I have a very good friend who's doing some amazing innovation in terms of mental health through AI. So I can see its benefit elsewhere. But in terms of speech, I've sat around with policy experts and we've been kind of trying to flesh it out, and people who work at the tech companies and people who work at other bilateral organizations. And, I've had some people say things like it's positive because it democratizes speech. So now someone can use its translation. And I suppose I could see that, but from where I stand, I also see the other side of all these translators who are being put out of work, and the AI tool doesn't do perfect translation and misses things. And again, there's this sense that we don't quite know who and how is programming all this. So, if you go into DeepSeek, for example, and you want to have something translated where you're talking about Tiananmen Square, is it going to kind of take that out and you won't be any of the wiser because this is a computer? So, I mean, I would love that. Maybe I'll invite you in first, and then I can talk about the negatives, of which I've probably already touched on one.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can get with us at any time. We can talk about the negatives, and we're seeing some comments here. What you just mentioned. The AI being wrong, and that's what we're kind of seeing on Discord. That's what first landed on my desk. Was that people were just messing with it and typing in what would be the loophole around saying something vulgar, and the AI stopped that. It blocked that, right, using words that are similar to the other words. But then for the straight up racist, misogynist, like comments, it just let it through. So, and then there's somebody I mentioned there. I wonder if the companies that are doing the censorship are doing it to protect themselves from litigation by the government. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, is that when these strongholds you, and especially with Discord that's about to do a IPO at a $25 billion valuation, they just can't risk any of these things, right? You can't be strong armed into submission right before your company's going to find some success. So these companies, they're relying on things that are going to be behind the curtains, behind the scenes, that we just don't see, because politics, right? It's corporation politics, and it's geopolitics, and whatever it may be, whether it's a government or a giant corporation that's another corporation that's strong arming them. It's one of these things that I'm seeing a lot of loopholes with this as well. Is that, oh, well, we didn't do that. The third party that we work with did that. So no, in my opinion, like if you're censoring people's messages, whether it's some third party or some government that told you to do it, it just doesn't matter. It's still censorship at the end of the day. It's oppressive, and it's not just oppressive. Honestly, I find it insulting that that people can really work as hard as they can with the projects and innovations and have the methods of going about their business in everyday life, just to have a monkey wrench thrown into the engine there. What about all these communities that exist out there? This isn't just Discord. This is, everything is rolling out globally, right? And it's all happening at once. And maybe you can fill us in on some information with that, because it just seems like all of the governments everywhere, all of the nations everywhere, they're all putting these steps in place the foundation, and it's getting worse day by day. It really is. And just looking into it, it's not looking promising, but it is promising in a sense that we know that there's tools and there's paths forward out there, and that's kind of what we want to make people aware of. But at first things first is they need to be aware of the censorship. They need to be aware of what's happening, and they may not always have the whys of why it's happening or the exact technical knowledge of how it's happening. But I think that people, if they're aware of these things, it's the only first step in moving forward. Is there a recent case of internet censorship that you think didn't get enough attention, or something that stuck with you personally?
Yeah, that is. But just to kind of go back to what we were talking about in terms of AI, I mean, I think from where I stand, some of the biggest issues are around, how are you going to trust information? I think that AI is going to make us incredibly cynical or incredibly naive and wrong on lots of matters. Because it will make us lazier. And at the moment, it's so lacking in transparency, all the different sides. I mean, I could give you an example where I was recently writing about the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Liu Xiaobo, who was given a Nobel Peace Prize around 2010, I think. And he was in a Chinese prison and they didn't let him out. And eventually he died in prison, and Beijing were furious at Oslo for giving him the Nobel Peace Prize. And I can't remember what exactly I put. I was trying to figure out maybe the year or something. I can't remember what it was, but I put this prompt into Google, and it was something like Beijing angry, Oslo Nobel Peace Prize Liu Xiaobo. And the thing that came up, that kind of the AI overview that you now get, it said Beijing was angry about this because Liu Xiaobo was a criminal who was guilty of all these egregious things, and how dare Oslo give it. Now, I know the history well, so I had the literacy there to think, well, no, that's wrong. But two things. Firstly, I was like, where is that being pulled from? And I think there is a lot of room there and some work we can do with some of the big tech companies to make sure that they're not pulling these things through from heavily biased state-run media outfits, because my assumption is that it must have been getting pulled through from something like China Daily or something. But the other thing is, I have that knowledge, but I have spent a lot of time in China and working with China dissident communities, studying the history of China. I know this stuff, but I think most other people would have just read that and would have just kind of shrugged and been like, oh, Liu Xiaobo was a criminal. And then his legacy of being this amazing human rights defender who did peaceful stuff, suddenly it becomes he's the criminal, and maybe Oslo some kind of corrupt thing that's just anti-China.
And that's the thing that we're seeing too, is other countries are anti other countries, and it's entire nation states, corporations, and any agenda that's doing this, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, we work at Index with lots and lots of dissidents, and we have seen how their identities get hijacked. We've seen very entry-level things back in the day where, we've all experienced this, where people will send emails in our name, right? The kind of the common scam. And back in the day, most of the time, this is to get your uncle to click on a link that then brings down your system, something like that, or to extract some money out of you or cause some mayhem in certain ways. But what we have been seeing more recently is that different states, very powerful states, have been targeting dissidents, and so they've been doing things like kind of hijacking their emails and doing bomb threats or rape threats, etc., in their name. And AI, again, is just this insanely powerful tool that is going to make these things so much more realistic. Like, the potential to hijack someone's face, someone's voice, and make it so much more realistic, and the chaos and confusion that can be caused. Now, as I said earlier, you know, I don't think AI is all bad from a broader society level, but I think from a freedom of expression level, I see far more downsides to upsides. And I think we're going to have to really be on top of this to make sure that we keep it all in check.
And that's the thing is keeping it in check is, I think, is the goal here. And it's very wide. It's a very big horizon that we're foreseeing with this. You know, even I get tricked by these things, and the AI hallucinates, and you know, it gives me bullet points of a subject. You know, that's like maybe it's coming up with its own talking points, but it's just leaving out so much information. Or, you know, how do I know that these AIs and stuff that give me the summaries, how do I know it doesn't have its own bias as to, you know, block certain content from making it into those bullet points? And you can't crush down an entire topic into just a couple bullet points. I mean, I would love that we could do that, because it saves my brain from, you know, having to read, you know, all these articles that are out there. And I really want to, but I don't have the time for that. But it's even tricking me. It's you know, I'm seeing these things too. I'm being linked to these things on our internal Slack every day, all day, and it's like what they're telling us versus how things are two different things as well. But then now we have that extra layer, the bullet point layer, which is definitely you know, it's just a summary of what the actual truth is, right? And so these things, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of people becoming aware of these things. But when it comes to things like China, I don't even know how China is, right? I'm not sure, because they, technology-wise, they're so sectored off into what they do over there. Like they have the great the firewall for China, and a lot of people can't access the internet outside of it. You know, they come to us. They're like, "Hey, will your product work in China?" Well, and it can be hit or miss, right? It's one of those things that you know, we just it's so hard to see how people are living in these other countries, unless you go over there and live it yourself, unless you see it yourself, and then, you know, you're trying to interact with you know, the Western Hemisphere, and then come to your own conclusion. And that's the thing is I don't know anything about China. I think we saw something like, it was like Red Panda or something. Whenever TikTok was on the chopping block for the United States, everybody jumped over to some other app, and then it kind of had a mix between China and you know, the Americans making content and everything. I mean, they didn't understand each other, but it was cool to see for about a week, and then, you know, it kind of died off, and China blocked everybody from interacting with the Western people. So it's I've seen a lot is all I can say with all of this, and I'm still, even being, you know, 20 years into this, I'm still trying to form my own opinion as to grasp what's actually happening, especially in regards to censorship. And you know, privacy is just one thing. You know, that's one of the first layers between us and the rest of the world, is having these privacy layers so that we can, you know, at least collect ourselves and think. Um, Chris, do you have anything to add on this with the AI and what she said?
I know she brought up a lot of good points. I think you really touched on most of the issues. You know, like that the problem is that a lot of people just take AI, whatever AI says is fact, and there's no thought process to wonder, how did it come to this conclusion? What are your sources? You know, like I use AI regularly, but I've gotten into the habit, when it tells me information, I'll immediately ask it, tell me how you came to this conclusion and list all of your sources, so that I can kind of understand the thought process behind it. And pretty regularly, I'm like, yeah, that conclusion is completely wrong. Like this, you grabbed a bunch of biased sources, and this is not it. But if you just take it for fact, you might just believe that, and then move on with your life having incorrect information. And it's scary, because like, you don't know, is that just a mistake? Did it just accidentally grab a source that it shouldn't? Or is there something going on behind the scenes where they're like, hey, anytime someone asks about this, please give them this information. And, you know, without being able to see what's going on behind the scenes, like, you really don't know. And as it becomes embedded into our life more and more, our ability to understand what is real and what isn't is going to quickly slip away.
And then the flip side as well is that what might happen is the governments around the world who are, you know, embracing it now, places like the UK want it to be the silver bullet, the kind of the thing that's going to help lift up the economy. They then might not think about some of these consequences as much, and then wake up in 10 years time and have this mad panic, and then have the kind of the thing that we're seeing with social media, where they've gone from, yay, social media, tech companies come here, to we want to completely ban you. So I think that, you know, in my opinion, AI is here to stay. Loads of people are using them. I mean, I sometimes use AI. But I think we need to move very cautiously and slowly, and have a very grown-up conversation about how we want it in our lives, and how and what exactly is happening to create these models, to feed into these models, and make sure that we're happy with where it is, rather than just saying, yeah, let's go for it now, and then waking up in 10 years time and regretting it and wanting to do a complete U-turn, a very harsh U-turn.
Well, thank you for filling us in with that. You know, I can sit here and talk to you for days on all of this, really, and we just don't have enough time for that today. I'm really happy that you're here. Can we speak about Section 230? Section 230 is often described as the 26 words that created the internet. From your perspective, what did it actually enable, and do you think the general public understands Section 230's role in a free and open internet?
In a word, no, I don't think probably most people understand it entirely. So Section 230 is basically the provision that says that the social media companies are platforms and not publishers. And I think society gets that, because we've been talking for a long, long time about that role. And also there's a tension there. We've been talking for a while about whether they should be just platforms or publishers. What I think the average person might not understand is that that has meant for them that the platforms themselves cannot be responsible in terms of litigation. So if someone was to go on and say, defame someone else, the platforms are not held responsible. It's only the person who's made the comment. So that's kind of the main thrust of what it is it's trying to separate them out so that you can have a less moderated, more free internet, because otherwise the platforms, if they thought they were going to be held responsible for every single speech that happened on them, they would overly censor and control. So I think it's generally probably been a good thing. I also think it's not been solely good, that there are problems with the platforms, as we talked about at the beginning. When firstly, it doesn't mean that platforms can't moderate themselves, can't have their own moderation policies, and they do. And it also means that they've been able to wash their hands of quite a lot of the bile and vitriol that happens within them, to say, well, we're just the platform, we're not the publisher. To respond to that point can be very challenging, because lots of times when you talk about things like hate speech and stuff, they become more subjective. And I have an inherent nervousness with giving platforms more power to judge these things. But in essence, Section 230 or 230 has been the thing that has allowed social media to become so powerful and to become the amazing, at times, you can talk about all the bad things, but it has been linked to so much amazing democratization of speech globally. So it has been the provision that has been really, really impactful and has enabled that. But I don't think we're in a perfect place.
Right, and the perfect place is definitely not something where we're at. And it's, the platforms, they have their own issues, they have their own problems, and they have their own policies that they have to enforce. We've seen this with Blue Sky. They just recently, a couple states, maybe one state that I know of for sure, that required them to upload identifications, IDs for people, and they said, we just don't have the means to do that, especially just when you throw that on us right now. And it is a harder technical capability to add these things into platforms. And even Electronic Frontier Foundation, they said, the saying of, when it becomes too hard to moderate your own content, they'll just shut down the forum, right? So they'll just close that avenue of free speech, or they'll close that avenue of people interacting, and it does throw everybody off. And it's one of these things that I'm seeing in real time now, where communities are looking to rebuild now that that their constituents of their own communities are being forced to upload these identifications, that people and this is with Section 230, and it's the platforms aren't liable for the content that's posted on there. And I think we're kind of seeing a lot with that, as far as like Facebook allowing certain advertisements to come through, certain, and when I look at this, I see the hate magnet, and that's it's what I call it. And it's where the algorithm feeds the priority to like controversial things, and that's usually heated topics. And so it's unless you see the algorithms and know how these things work and interact with it yourselves, it's hard to get a take on that. And Chris, you work a lot with this. Even you came to me and said, your content is great, Shane, that you're writing about. I can write about the truth all day. I can go stand on top of buildings and with a megaphone, and it's almost like speaking to a brick wall. And it's just because I'm not throwing those keywords in there, the buzzwords to get myself into being seen. Chris, what's your take on this 230?
Yeah, I mean, like, she's absolutely right that it's not perfect, but at the same time, like, I think it's the only thing that is giving us any sort of ability to speak freely on the internet. I mean, you think every day people post all kinds of horrible things on the internet. That's the fact of the matter. There are a lot of awful people out there that post awful things. Do you think Facebook or Instagram or X are going to be willing to go fight in court to preserve your right to say those awful things? Absolutely not. They're not even going to question it. If there's even any chance that it might be considered something that could lead them to legal trouble, gone, immediately moderated. For most sites, they're not even going to take the risk of moderating after the fact. They're going to want all posts to go into a moderation queue and be looked at by AI probably immediately to determine whether or not you're allowed to even post that. So I think, without Section 230 right there, the amount of posts that will just get filtered out before anybody ever gets a chance to see them would just be mind blowing. Like, I think probably 30-40% of what gets posted on a daily basis will just disappear into the void and never be seen by anybody.
And that's the thing, is I think all the good things and all the great things and all of the the great organizations out there, even they're already being not seen. And that's the thing, is my view on this is strictly from an observer point of view. I have to just look at these things. I have to be aware of them, especially working in information security, these types of deals. All I can do is be aware of these things and observe what's happening. But to see it is and to form an actual opinion on this. Here's the thing: is other people, we just have to get involved. We have to find ways and to be a part of these better missions and we need to see the overall picture together, is what I think. What's a project you're working on right now that you're personally excited about, and why does it matter to you?
So the project that I'm working on at the moment that I have been really thrilled to get over the line is something called Letters from Afghan Women. And it's essentially, we're working on the ground with Afghan women who are the most censored people probably in the world as a kind of a large group. I mean, women in North Korea have greater rights than women in Afghanistan. And we are just allowing them to write on what they want to write on because their voice has been so the center of the attack. I wanted to raise this today partly because it is the thing I'm really excited about, because I think it goes back to so much of what Index is about, but also because there is a digital element to it as well. We do a lot of work on encryption, on end-to-end encryption. There are various different forces around the world that are trying to create backdoors, which we think would be an absolute disaster. And lots of the work we do is just not possible without encryption. And actually, the Afghan women's work is one of those classic examples. So whilst the words themselves have nothing to do with encryption, these women are not writing about that. The way it happens, the thing that enables it, is a classic example of one of the best aspects of tech, of how tech has completely changed the game for Index.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. Besides donating, what are the most meaningful ways people can support Index on Censorship's work? We'll put your donation link in the description, and we'll mention it here, and also periodically reference it and the ticker going across the bottom of the screen. But what are the most meaningful ways people can support Index of Censorship's work?
Well, thank you very much for putting the donate button. Of course, all donations are appreciated. We are a charity, so we work and operate on the goodwill of people. We would also love people to sign up to our newsletter, which is, you can see the sign up thing on our homepage of our website. If you sign up to our newsletter, then you will get all of our kind of very specific calls to action of, you know, join this campaign or read our latest magazine. We do lots in terms of digital rights, as I think you're ascertaining. Not everything we do is in terms of digital specifically. Most things are underpinned by digital. Not everything is, but we still do write about digital. I mean, the newsletter that just came out today was in fact on the ban, the under 16 bans around the world, and why we thought it would be a pretty bad idea. So, you know, I think that's probably the best thing to do, is donate now, ideally, and also sign up to our newsletter to find out more.
Absolutely, and we want people to sign up, but we want people to see what's actually happening. You know, there's, you know, whatever philosophy we have in life, it's in the real world here, in the material world, it's technology that connects us all. It's the internet, right? We have this great access to all the information ever in the world. So does the AI. You know, I think they're running out of information to you know, feed these AI systems. But it is the one thing that connects us all, and it allows us to see the different perspectives and you know, the truth. And I think that's what, you know, most people's actually, I would hope most people seek, is the actual truth. And to see, you know, the level of digital sovereignty. You know, I've seen with working with communities that just, you know, people coming together in amazing ways. And, you know, I'm one of those people. I've met some of the most amazing people in my life through the internet, right? And these are all means that, you know, wouldn't have existed in, you know, the 90s, or not, I wouldn't say the 90s, but, you know, the early internet hasn't come it for what it's become today. It's opened up so many avenues, and just to be able to read actual good content now that's not AI generated, that's not biased towards a certain thing, and that's saying, hey, you know, this is what's actually happening, and here's what you can expect, and you know, just getting somebody that has a you know, professional mindset on these things, I think is a great thing, right? It's I for years have tried to write content and get content out there. You know, I really enjoy creative writing. That's just something I do in my as a hobby. But that's the thing, is just even writing this stuff, it just felt like I had no audience. And that's the thing, is maybe it's because I'm not as well versed in all of these things. But it's definitely something that we're just now being able to do, is have our own voice out there. And, you know, and that's the thing, is we want everybody to have a voice. We don't feel like these topics they should go underappreciated. We don't feel these topics should even go ignored, especially in these other countries where, you know, they don't have the level of freedoms that, you know, the top countries have. And it's only going to keep changing. And that's the thing, is it's definitely going to keep changing, and we need to change and adapt with it, which means we need to hear voices like yours. We need to see what you have to show us all, and we need to always know that we can be a part of that. So if you guys are out there listening, go ahead, send them a donation, and you know, sign up for that newsletter. We want this voice to be heard, for sure.
Well, thank you, Shane. And what I would say as well is thank you for inviting me on and for doing what you do, because one of the things that's at the heart of Index is the sense that we're a community and we want to show solidarity. We've always done that since the 1970s, since we got those calls from those Russians who, you know, were in this desperate situation. And it's no more so relevant today. So, you know, having your support is really, really invaluable. And I think at this moment in time where we're seeing all these different pressures around the world on speech, I think we need to remember that there are so many people out here who really, really care about freedom of expression and the role it plays in our democratic landscape, and who are willing to fight. And we should all, you know, kind of work together ultimately.
Absolutely, I agree. And it's, you know, I run a small creative writing community. I feel like positive expression, it really helps us as individuals. what's to say like these AIs aren't going to censor, my community or even censor me for having creative writing and not writing about things in general, but, maybe write about some sci-fi, write about something that the AI doesn't agree with. And then I'm going to be deprioritized, and something that's great and good that I think, is already finding these levels of censorship and oppression, because now it's something that I personally had to deal with. And that's just me personally. That has nothing to do with BP. But it's something that I'm seeing in the real world. So we're going to open up the Q&A. If anybody has any questions, we have the answers. We're a bit limited on time here, but if anybody,
actually, I'd like to
yeah,
jump
go
right
for it,
in.
Nathan.
I wanted to ask our guest here, you have a very accomplished career, as we can see, but do you have any advice for young aspiring journalists, like tips or tricks, lessons you've learned? I'm sure you've made mistakes and had great, successes. And if you just had anything for somebody looking to get into that, any lessons?
Yeah, so I would say that my career has been accelerated and held back in equal measure. Accelerated by moving to China and being being in a country that had such an interesting story, and being able to learn on the job and get this area that I could know a decent amount. And I wouldn't call myself quite an expert these days, but certainly at one stage I felt like that. And so I think just kind of getting out into the field and really getting on the grounds and getting your kind of teeth into something, I think is really, really good. The flip side, I would say, is that I never did any formal journalism training, in terms of I never went to, I didn't study at a university level. And so I learned everything on the job. That also means I made all my mistakes on the job. So, I do think that it's kind of this view that, journalism is just writing. And if you go to university, I did history undergrad. I thought, I can write an essay, I can write a journalism thing. No, they're completely different. And I think it would have been maybe a year or two of going to grad school might have actually been worth kind of 3 years of learning on the job. So it's very expensive, but if you have the money and you have the inclination, I think there is a lot of value.
There definitely is a lot of value. Thank you for sharing that. And it's, when I see like the journalists on, the mainstream news, I always refer to them and joke around as call them the talking heads. It's kind of rude, but when you come at us with the cookie cutter stuff, and there's actual real people out here dealing with real issues, seeing it in real time, and keeping it real with all of us, I think is the most important thing. You keep it real, and I think that's a great thing. Chris, do you have any questions?
Let's have a question, just a kind of a point I wanted to bring up, and also just to thank Index for the amazing work they've done over the years, because so many people kind of live in this bubble, and they only really care about issues that affect them personally, and that's like such a huge mistake, especially when it comes to stuff like censorship, because if censorship is affecting you, you no longer have the ability to do anything about it. You've just lost the ability to talk about it. So censorship is something where we have to protect our neighbors. We have to protect the other people around the world, because once it's affecting them, they don't have the ability to do it themselves anymore. And that's why it's so important to have organizations like Index that have contacts all around the world and are tapped into everything that's going on, because we just wouldn't know that these things are going on around the world if it weren't for organizations like that. So it's just something that we really have to look beyond our own bubble and look beyond our own lives and our own influences, and realize that other people out there need us to stand up for them, and someday you're going to need other people to stand up for you too. So it's something we really do all have to work together, whether it affects you right now or not. It's going to someday.
Thank you so much for your support, Chris. And yeah, I would just add to that is a really important message for the Index to try and make, is that that kind of them today, you tomorrow, and we do, through a lot of our magazine and editorial, especially looking at trying to understand how censorship functions and how different countries got to where they got to. So the magazine team are busy doing an issue on Hungary at the moment to look at how Hungary, how Viktor Orban has ultimately kind of throttled all the institutions, and what messages we can take away from that to better prepare so that we don't become a Hungary in the UK.
Or become something like Iran. And I think that's the scariest thing. And I don't really like to talk politics, but just to see what's going on with these things it breaks my heart. It truly does. Because I never once thought that these types of things would be something that I would be seeing in the world. And, imagine how, these people are just feeling over there that they don't even have access to the internet I'm seeing things like, we're getting Starlink into Iran to the best of our ability as a nation here, so that we can connect people to the internet online. And if the world were to actually see what's actually happening in these other places, without that censorship, I think it would wake us all up in a different light is what I'm thinking with this. We just know that we'll always support you, and we'll always support all your projects and all the things that you believe in, because we believe in these things as well. They're important. They matter. And I think that's the most important takeaway from all of this, is that the things that we all believe in and that you all believe in, they matter. And that's something that we're always going to preach and always going to believe in. From the cypherpunk mission to the very days of today, it is something that we live this life. And that's something that Chris and I say often, is that we live this life. It's something that we do this every day, day in, day out. I'm looking at Nathan and Chris. These guys are up 20 hours a day working specifically on this, just so that we can have a voice here at VP, but also so that we can give other people a voice, and so that we can value the voices that are out there. And I just want to say thank you from VP for being a wonderful voice.
Well, thank you as well.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's wrap up. Thank you so much for being here. If anybody wants to send questions to us later on down the road, it doesn't have to be right now. Feel free to reach out to us, and we social medias will include. But definitely reach out to us if anybody wants to hop on, have a voice as well, and give us a perspective on these things, and talk with the leaders of the industry here. Feel free to shoot us a shout out, and we'll get you going from there. Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, I just again wanted to thank her for being here today. This was such an honor, and I think a lot of really important information that hopefully people really take to heart.
Honestly, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. One thing left to say, and that's onward.
We build a safe place where the speech is always free, where cypherpunks go to just hide and speak. Hide and speak. We stay in the shadows and make some noise. Hide and speak. Digital freedom, yeah, that is our choice. Hide and speak. Privacy doesn't mean not having a voice. Hide and speak. What you want to share is only your choice. Hide and speak.
The early internet was the wild, wild west. Strange. Free. We explored, we broke things. And yes, we failed. No rules. And that was beautiful. But times have changed. We hesitate. We censor ourselves because we know they're watching. Surveillance kills curiosity, turning the internet from a frontier of hope into a cage of silence. And your VPN? It's based on trust. For let's be real, nobody has ever lied to me, said nobody ever. Yet true privacy is still within reach. vp.net doesn't rely on trust, it runs on real-time proof. Because privacy is about becoming your truest self when no one's watching. So you can be the best you when they are. Otherwise be an NPC, a digital product, and lose. vp.net, don't trust, verify.